Welcome to I May Be Wrong.
I don't know what this world is coming to.
But so, we're broadcasting from the greater Nashville area, the home of country music, beyond the borders of political correctness and identity politics. Facts and faith are our demarcations. Truth lights our path.
Here's the Barry White of Podcast Radio,
the venerable Alfonso Ashworth.
Well, welcome to another exciting episode of I May Be Wrong, but I don't think so. We got a great program lined up for you this 30 minutes. I wish the show would be an hour. We plan to do an hour at some point. Of course, we're very excited. We got a great guest coming on this hour. I see people are joining in on the broadcast on Facebook Live. If you want to ask questions, if you have a comment, go to Facebook Live, go to my Facebook Live page, of course, and you can be a part of asking questions. Or you can join us, of course, at our chat room that we call the Furnace. You can go to our Discord app and get some questions in there as well. But of course, we're going to get right into this because our guest today is Mr. Thurman Mullins. He's a ranch manager for Charlie Daniels. He's been a ranch manager for him for 40 years. Believe that, man. That's amazing. Of course, Thurman was born in 1948, a great time. He's born in a place called Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is right next door to our county. He rodeoed around the military from 1965 to 1974, bull riding, bareback broncs, and clowning. He has a B.S. in animal science at a Middle Tennessee State University in 1972. He's also a Vietnam veteran. He served in Vietnam from 69 to 70. He was a FMF Corpsman at the 3rd Marine Division, 1st Recon Battalion, 1st Marine Division. Of course, we thank him for his service. Also, he was a Tennessee State Park Ranger at Cedars, Lebanon State Park. He was the first superintendent of the Long Hunter State Park. He left the park program in 1979, worked on the Charlie Daniels Twin Pines Ranch at that time. He's raised horses, cattle, produced roping clinics, roping events, rodeos. He's the real McCoy, folks. President of the North American Corrente Association for 2 terms. He recruited to open the Bicentennial Capitol Mall State Park that started in 1995. Continued his work on the ranch. He's a full-time ranch manager since 2016. He's written articles and publications in like Western Horseman, Cowboy Magazine, and other similar publications. Of course, I am very excited to welcome to the program Mr. Thurman Mullins. Welcome to the show, Thurman.
Good morning, Al. How are we making it this morning?
Well, I'm making it great. There's a lot happening. This thing with the Democrats and what's going on with the impeachment. The Democrats, their minds are like cement, mixed up and already permanently set when it comes to this thing about the impeachment. But what I'm having you on today is something I'm very interested in. Because you hear so many things on social media and on the internet about the history of the American cowboy and also the Black American cowboy. And a lot of that information, I'm wondering how accurate the information really is. So that's one reason I wanted to have you on today so that you can share your knowledge. Give the audience a little bit of background about why it is that you are interested in this subject and what it is that you have that you can bring to the table.
Well, I appreciate that, Al. I've been a history buff all of my life. When I started college, I started out as a history major, and then what I discovered pretty fast was that I wasn't interested in the politics and the dates and the numbers they were throwing out so much as I was in the stories. And I love the stories, be it medieval history or American history or military or cowboys or whatever. And I always liked the rest of the story, going back to that line, and that's true, is that there's so much misinformation out there. and conflicting information. And I've worked for Charlie Daniels at Twin Pines Ranch for 40 years, and been blessed to work with some super, super good cowboys. I'm a wannabe cowboy. I'm 40 years. I've been doing it 40 years. I'm 71 years old, and I'm still trying to get it right. But, nevertheless, I've had the privilege of working with some good guys. And what kind of, I guess, I'd already done a lot of reading and research on Black Cowboys
Yeah.
prior to my ever going to work for Charlie. And in 1982, I think it was, I had a leg get broken in three places by a stallion, and I met a fella looking for some horses that I told Charlie about by the name of Leroy Crawford. And Leroy was from South Mississippi. Down, people don't think of it in those terms, but Mississippi has some huge farms and ranches, and there's a lot of people still down there doing it like they did it 100 years ago, at least big parts of it. And when you go to work in cattle and horses, all the college degrees in the world aren't worth flip. You've got to have somebody that can read cattle, somebody that can read horses, somebody that knows how to anticipate a move, somebody that knows how to saddle, ride, and rope. And those are getting fewer and harder to come by. Leroy had moved to Tennessee. I think he was probably 42 or 3 when I first met Leroy. Uh, and he'd come up with a gentleman that was leasing a lot of land, running a lot of cattle up here. And that fellow was going back to Mississippi, and Leroy wanted to stay up here and had talked to me about coming to work at the ranch. And we really weren't hiring anybody at the time. But when my right leg got broken 3 places, all of a sudden we needed somebody that knew what they were doing with horses and cattle. And Charlie asked me if I knew of anybody, and I suggested Leroy, and they called a veterinarian that Leroy had been hipping some, and Leroy became part of the Pines family. And remarkable individual. He had the patience of Job with a young horse, which is very important. He wasn't what I call a whipper and a spur. He didn't try to break a horse in 10 minutes. He took his time.
Right.
When he got through with the horse was trained and was a friend. It wasn't somewhere a horse was scared of you and cooperated till he got a chance to pay you back.
Right.
Like
Well, and of course, in with all that, in terms of your background, and in terms of what you know about the history of the cowboy, what is it that many Americans have missed that either they got from Hollywood or they, read in some cartoon or some novel? What is it that most Americans have not learned about the American cowboy and the black cowboy in particular?
Well, I guess, and I was kind of building up to this in the sense that we started putting on roping events and rodeos, and I would hear periodically people make the comment, "I've never seen a black cowboy." When Leroy would ride out into the arena, and later his sons, Derek or Glenn or Little Pep, they'd say, "I've never heard of a black cowboy." And I'd say, well, when the Civil War was over, and that's kind of when the westward cowboy era started in, I said, it's pretty well documented that over a fourth of the cowboys that rode the Chisholm Trail and all the other cattle drives or working on ranches were black, at least a fourth of them. And that's a number that is pretty well standard with historians, and there's a lot of give and take there. And again, going back to so many of the early movies, Al, you never saw black cowboys.
Right.
Now, Bill Pickett is a black gentleman that was credited with starting the event of bulldogging. And he did appear in some silent black and white films, more as a documentary. This was before sound movies. Now, later on, and this is something a lot of people I find are unaware of, there was a jazz singer, Herb Jeffries, that in the 30s, his mother was white. He grew up in Minnesota, and His dad was black, and he was very light complected, but he considered himself a black man and was very proud of that. And he decided there needed to be black westerns, and actually put it together to where he produced and directed and starred in, and
Wow.
he was Bob Blake, the good guy, wore a white Stetson and rode a white horse named Stardust. And when they had finished making the Wizard of Oz, they had brought in all of these little people, and before people got so politically correct, you would say midgets. And when it was over with, there wasn't anything for them to do. There wasn't any jobs for them in that area. And there was a guy that came up. His name was Jed Buell. Why I know this stuff, I don't know. No more useless
Let us
argument.
know it.
But yeah, Jed Buell had decided to make a movie called The Terrors of Tiny Town. I've got a copy of it, and it's all the little people that were in the Wizard of Oz and cowboys. And
Right.
it's a full-blown, they ride ponies and they shoot at one another, and it's just it's a cult film now, more or less. So initially, and Jeffries was already successful as a singer and performing Duke Ellington and very well known. He convinced Jed Buell that there was a need for a black western for the all-black cast. And first thing is, where do you get the extras? And at that time, there weren't that many black people living in Southern California. So what they did is they recruited the people that had been brought out for the Tarzan movies.
Okay.
And so they were in the movies as good guys, bad guys, cowboys. The name has left me, but one of the guys, either Amos or Andy, was like the comical sidekick. You know, in all of the Gene Autry's and Roy Rogers, you had to have Gabby Hayes or somebody that was Froggy Millhouse or somebody that was kind of the comic part of the show. And so they had him in as a sidekick and doing kind of the humor stuff. Now, oddly enough, Jeffries was very light complected. And the guy Buell said that he didn't want him to star in it. They needed somebody that was darker.
Okay.
And Jeffrey says, "Well, you know, I can darken up." You know, he was,
Right.
"I'm a black man, but if you need me darker, we'll get darker." So they finally conceded to go ahead and let him play the deal, and he became known as the Bronze Buckaroo. And in fact, Jeffries was highly successful in a lot of stuff. He owned clubs in the Riviera, Paris. You know, he was a shaker and a mover at that time. But at any rate, he wanted to be a singing cowboy. And he'd grown up watching the old westerns, and he was big on Tom Mix and later, of course, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and those guys. So they made several films. One of them, Harlem on the Prairie. He became known as the Bronze Buckaroo, and the
Right.
Bronze Buckaroo was the name of one of his films. And he was, and I've got a copy of the Bronze Buckaroo. I've not been able to locate a couple of others that was kind of popular. Harlem Rides the Range and
Well,
Two Men Gun from Harlem.
yeah, and of course that's the Hollywood take on the Black Cowboy.
That was
Let's
it.
talk about some of the
That's a real history.
realities. Go ahead.
Well, probably one of the best ones that came along was when Larry McMurtry did Lonesome Dove, and he had Bo Zycard was a guy that rode with Chisholm. Now that wasn't a character in the movie, but
Right.
in the movie you had Dietz, and Dietz was travel with the guys, and he was um probably one of the most famous ones of the whole crowd. And in the movie, he gets killed by an Indian trying to save an Indian child. Dietz
Hmm.
does. Now, with that said, they came in and with Bo Zycard, who was a real person who traveled with Chisholm. When he traveled with Chisholm, now this is the Real Cowboy, the real
Okay.
band. he would take and was the banker. He hauled the money because coming back from a cattle drive, they would have a ton of money a lot of times. And the least likely person, because of the mental attitude at the time, that would be toting all the money
Would be
would
the
be the
black
black guy.
person. Yeah.
So Bose carried the money, and when he died, he Chisholm had him buried there at the cemetery where his family was, and I actually copied this off so I wouldn't screw it up. But it said Bose Icard, 1859 to 1928. Served with me 4 years on the Goodnight Loving Trail, never shirked duty or disobeyed an order. Rode with me in many stampedes, participated in 3 engagements with Comanches, splendid behavior. See, Goodnight. Now, in the movie, when McMurtry did Joshua Dietz, who was patterned after Bo Zycard, he had on the tombstone, Josh Dietz served with me 30 years, fought in
Right.
21 engagements with Comanche and Kiowa, cheerful in all weathers, never shirked a task, splendid behavior. Honestly, it's sort of like Vietnam movies.
Right.
I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 that I would recommend to anybody. Most of them are so far off base or so trying to make some kind of weird political statement that they're just garbage. Same thing with a lot of the old
Westerns.
westerns.
Yeah.
The Roy Rogers, Gene Autry westerns were called B movies. They were made real fast. They were made at a very low budget. Now, when Jeffries made his movies, and he joked about it, he said his movies was a lower budget, and they were C minus movies. Instead of a B movie, they were C minus movies.
Right.
And his movies were for fun.
Yeah.
They were to entertain. They weren't to make a statement. None of that. Ironically, um, I can't think of very many westerns that were that realistic. When you study that era, going back to the 1880s and up in the 1920s and so forth, most people out west, if you were a cowboy and could do the job, most places didn't care if you were black, white, or purple.
Right.
If you could work cattle, it was kind of funny that most cowboys, on average, on the ranch, would get $10 a month and board. When they did a cattle drive, they would get 30. The cook, who frequently was a black guy, would be the highest paid one on the drive outside of
Right.
the rim
And
line.
probably one of the
And
most important ones on the drive.
oh, he was the doctor. He was a cook. He was the nursemaid. He was the alarm clock. You bet. He was very much so. Now, it was kind of funny, kind of hard staying on track to a point, but when in your picture that you put up on the website, you had a picture of Nate Love. His
Right.
name is spelled N-A-T, but it's Nate Love. He was actually born in Davidson County
Wow.
and lived there till he was 16. And his dad, when the war was over, stayed on the plantation. The guy that owned the plantation
The Civil
gave
War.
him
Yeah.
the Civil War. He gave them a plot of land to raise their own food on, and they worked there as more of a partnership type deal. His dad died the second year after the war was over. Nate took and won a horse at a raffle and sold it back to the guy that raffled it for $50 and went west. When he got out there, he had a knack, and this sort of, I kind of don't want to be jumping around too much, but
Okay.
a lot of your cowboys, the black or white that wound up out west being cowboys, they were on the plantations, typically would be into agriculture, be it farming, breaking and training horses, uh, working cattle.
Right.
So that was a natural job for them to fall into. Now, Nate, as well as a lot of other black people that were prominent during the Old West, wrote books. And a lot of them are very, very inaccurate. Either A, time gets things turned around and you remember things a little differently, or you're trying to make something exciting that would sell.
Right.
So he would put out, there was a guy, in fact, he was known as Red River Dick before he was known as Deadwood Dick. And that came from working down in Arizona. He made a cattle drive, or went on a cattle drive to Deadwood, South Dakota. While he was at Deadwood, they had a rodeo. Um, Now, backing up again, there had been a guy, a white guy in New York, had written a series of dime novels, which were very popular at the time. And he had a character called Deadwood Dick, which has nothing to do with Nate at all.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, that got to be real popular. You had everybody claiming to be Deadwood Dick. They'd go back east and, hey, I'm Deadwood Dick that the guy wrote about and all that. Well, Nate got his name. They had a rodeo with $200, and it's not like the rodeos we have today. It wasn't that polished, but he won the roping, throw down tie. He rode the saddle broncs. He won all the competition, and people in Deadwood called him Deadwood Dick
Right.
because Deadwood Dick was adopted from these dime novels. But they all said that if anybody was Deadwood Dick, he was the man they wanted. Now, he actually ranched later. He was captured by the Pima Indians. He was wounded, went on being a cowboy. And then, like a lot of people, when he got a certain age, he went to work for the railroad. And when I say we get to be a certain age, he was getting too broke up and shot up to be still cowboying, and he went to work as a Pullman porter with the railroads.
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you, Thurman.
Yeah.
When you said shot up, a lot of people gonna want to know, and briefly, if possible, how accurate were the gunslingers? You know, because I noticed the character that you're talking about had a firearm, which was probably very common. How often did they have these so-called gunfights? Was it very common or rare that they did?
Not at all. They were pretty rare, and most of those came from dime novels, and then
Right.
later on paperback westerns that were very popular. Louis L'Amour was the most true to his culture of anybody. If Louis wrote about a bush on the side of a trail going into Reno, it was there.
Right.
He researched, did his homework, and all of that. And again, I worked for Charlie Daniels. I got to meet Louis, but I never got to talk to him like I would have loved to have. Charlie did. They vacationed together. They
Right.
were big friends. And Louis, that was the sore spot with him, was that the way they put all of that stuff out, it gave you the impression that there was just a gunfight every Saturday night.
Right.
And the movies, of course, encouraged that. And sort of like going back, not just talking about how blacks were portrayed in movies. You take an outlaw like Jesse James. There was a show on TV. They ran a series of Jesse James movies, and every one of them, he was a totally different character.
Right.
Basically, he was a thug, outlaw, psychopath that cared a little for life, but it was the type of thing that I think all the movies kind of gave a different effect to that. One of the things that helped bring about a truer uh, story about the Cowboys probably was rodeo. And back when I started rodeoing in the 60s, it was rare to see a black cowboy. You would see them, but not that often. There'd be a few. There was a guy, Murtis Dykeman, who was the first black cowboy to compete in the NFR, National Finals Rodeo. That's the biggie. That's the one all the pro cowboys are shooting for. He never won at the finals, but he competed there 5 times. In 1967, he got up to third. Now, later on, as you started seeing more black cowboys competing in rough riding events and roping events into the 70s and going into the early 80s, Charlie Sampson was a black cowboy that grew up inner city in L.A. And he had access to some guys around the stock pen, and they got him started riding steers and so forth. And he actually wound up being the first black world champion cowboy bull rider at the NFR in 1982. Now, he received a serious head injury, facial injury as well, riding at the presidential rodeo in 83. And they let him compete after that. He wasn't supposed to ride at all for fear of a heavy jar killing him. He wore a lacrosse helmet. And that sort of started the trend where now if you see pro bull riders, that's become acceptable.
Right.
In the 60s or 70s, that was totally unacceptable. But anything you read, and I was fortunate to get to meet Murdy Stikeman, and I got to meet Charlie Sampson. We weren't fast friends or nothing like that. Wish we were, but we weren't. We just was acquaintances, basically. Anything you read about those guys or what nice people they were and how well they represented the rodeo, the sport of rodeo.
Exactly.
And they were a positive influence on children. You didn't read black and white, red, yellow. You read they were a positive influence on the rodeo and on the public. And that's what they were noted. They were extremely talented. But with that said, they were noted for being extremely personal and being friendly. One thing I think it would surprise a lot of people, there was a woman from Tennessee. She was born a slave, which a lot of these folks were in the 1800s, of course. And she wound up, Mary Fields, she was born in Hickman County. And she was one rough heifer. And they called her the White Crow, the Indians did in Montana. And they said she acted like a white woman but had black skin, and they called her the White Crow. And she was noted for drinking whiskey, cussing, being a Republican.
Well, I tell you what, Thurman, we got about a minute or two left on the show.
Well,
really quickly, tell people if they want to know more about the Black Cowboy or cowboys or people of that era, what's the best information that they can find? What's the best way to do that?
I almost hate to say this, but I found in reading books, Al, that you get as much misinformation, even by the authors sometime in this era. I would go to Wikipedia.
Okay.
And like my old daddy always told me, Al, don't believe everything you read and don't believe everything somebody told you. And I wrote some articles. Most of those publications are now long gone. I've got copies of them about Black Cowboys. The thing I was going to say about Mary real quick.
Yeah, real quick.
She was a stagecoach driver, and she was the first black woman that was hired as a mail carrier.
Wow.
And she was in Montana. And I'd like to throw out a hi to a couple of my favorite cowboys real quick.
Okay.
There's Willie Moorhead and MC Harden down in Lincoln County.
I'll be done.
And they work livestock to this day. That's what they do.
Right here in Tennessee.
Here in Tennessee. And a friend of mine, we were talking about him one day, and I thought this is the perfect thing to put on a tombstone. It says, no tougher or expert stockman ever drew a breath that was any better than these two men.
Wow.
And they can read cattle. They can get in there with cattle, get knocked down, get stepped on. But, again, anything you read, take it with a
grain of salt.
Yeah. Might want to get a pound.
They would be wise to get in touch with you, Thurman. And, of course, like you say, you've been a ranch manager for Charlie Daniels at Twin Pine Ranch now for several years. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Thurman, you can do so. Just contact me, and I will help you get in touch with Thurman. Thurman, I hate to say it's the end of the program, but it's almost the end of this program. I really want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
The invitation, and anytime, you know that, Al. You and your wife have been special to me for a lot of years.
Yeah.
There was a time before all of this stuff came up with cards and all of that. I'd bring all my film. I still trade with Al.
Yeah, you do. I appreciate it.
Get my pictures printed, and I'd go, oh, Lordy, that bull looks terrible. I'd run back, shoot some more pictures, and go back and fix me up.
I appreciate it, Thurman. Thank you so much for being on the program.
All right, and good. And anytime, Al, you give me a call, and I do appreciate you and what you stand for and what you do. You're a good man. Thank
you, sir. Of course, that was Thurman Mullins with Twin Pines Ranch, and he's the ranch manager for Charlie Daniels, and a longtime cowboy, rodeo, and, of course, a historian. And I really want to thank him for coming on the show. And I want to thank y'all for being a part of the show. We went over just a little bit, but it was worth it. And if you want to go back and listen again, go to I May Be Wrong, But I Don't Think So.com and follow the podcast there. But I really appreciate it. I want to tell you, of course, thank Thurman again for being on the show. And I want to tell you out there, God bless you, God bless America, God bless you, and God bless our children.
You've been listening to Alfonso Ashworth, the Barry White of Podcast Radio. Go forth and share his message. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. Remember, no two people can ever occupy the same place at the same time. You were uniquely and wonderfully made. Born an original. Don't die a copy. God bless. Peace.